automate your stack with GraphQL. My name is Lukas Holzer. As mentioned before, I'm working at Dynatrace in the developer experience field, and I want you now to highlight the whole topic with a point of view of developer experience. So when we take a look at the good old REST, it has a big advantage because it's easy to learn. There is no tooling required, and you probably love fetching too much data. The problem is it has a really rusty developer experience, and everything is any. And that's now the particular part I want to hook into. So some people love it, and it's okay. This shouldn't be a judgment about GraphQL or REST. So if you take a look at the Louvre and you see the picture of the sheer mass of overfetched data, you probably guess it's not with GraphQL, it's probably with REST. You fetch a ton of data. So, but what is the real problem? What do we want to solve? We want best-in-class developer experience. And we want autocompletion for what you search for. So a developer is highly relying on intelligence. You want typed data. It's extremely important. And a vast ecosystem that is not framework or like language dependent. And of course, you want only fetch what you need and not 10 records more. So good or REST, maybe rest in peace. So there is definitely a new sheriff in town, and this grand sheriff is called GraphQL. And that brings me to the next topic. So if you compare a single REST call to the Swappy API, for the people who don't know Swappy, it's like the Star Wars API. There is a REST API. There's a GraphQL API. And without any fancy tooling, just a plain fetch call, the REST option wins, in my opinion, the developer experience because it's easier to read than the GraphQL. But we have here already one big difference. In the example of REST, we are fetching 10 results due to pagination. And we need 5.9 kilobyte. In the example of GraphQL, we are only interested in the name. So we are getting all the 82 results, but with a total of 1.9 kilobyte. So this problem is still that both have any types. So because we don't have any typing or tooling here, it doesn't help us on the other points of the list. So when we recall what we want to achieve with the autocompletion, we haven't succeeded in there. With the type data, we haven't succeeded. We've only succeeded in fetching what you need. But there we have a reduction by 76%. So how to get typed responses? In my ideal world, I want to write a query. I want to focus now on what do I really want to fetch. So why not write a allpeople.graphql file and say, okay, give me from all people the name. Then there is a magic command. It's called CodeGen. And with that, there is something invoked, a tooling. And suddenly there is like get generated TypeScript file with like super cool typings. And because I love working with React, I'm letting me generating some hooks. And these hooks can be used with just a really, really simple data link. In this case, I've prepared an API with books. So I've here a small project, a small backend, serverless function based on Netlify I deployed, where I specify I have here a small schema where I say, okay, I have a query where I can get a book list with a type of book. And here I have my data.json where I have like books, a list of books, name, author, description. And of course, a small serverless function that has a resolver that knows how to get or filter those books. But in the front end, what I'm interested in is just querying the parts, what you want and what you need. And I don't have anything running like from a tooling perspective. So I can go here and say, okay, I don't want an author. Let's check what I have here as well. And I get instant feedback what I can really query. So description. If I now go ahead and start my development server, in this case, a simple yarn dev, which will go to a Netlify dev command. That's only here for a small demonstration purpose that will serve my functions on the backend. And I have here a second command. It's the codegen commando. I will start this in the background as well. You see, oh my gosh, I have here my small React app where I can display my results and I can filter by the author. So if I go here with Stefan, I see Stefan Baumgarten has written a book, TypeScript in 50 lessons. And yeah, so I go back and I say, okay, I want instant feedback. What is potentially coming along the street? Oh, then I have to invoke it here. So I have here like a small GraphQL config.js that serves the purpose of local development in my IDE, where I can then execute my schema. And now it asks for a value for the author. I just say, okay, Stefan. Sorry, that's the live demo purpose now. So, oh, the command exited. That's the problem. So I'm because I started the watch command. But the cool thing is the query will adapt and it will automatically generate a so-called fetcher with awesome tabs. And that's now the big point, because when I now hover over what is actually data, I see it's not any anymore. It's like of type book query. And if I go here along and say, okay, what's here? Oh, I get books. And on the books, I have an array here. So probably take the first example, because I'm lazy and I don't want to check it here. I'm just going ahead and say, okay, should have an author. Cool, I'm saving it. This should hopefully recompile the whole thing when my dev server is not flaky currently. And it should present me then an updated list. But the cool thing is now, every API changes. And it changes over time, but your source code probably won't change. So you see, I just get the author. The cool thing now is that when I go back and I say, okay, I don't have an author here. I have only a name or something else, yeah, and I save it. It will automatically regenerate everything based on your query. So really on your query, and it will then provide you with IntelliSense where TypeScript actually fails and say, hey, there is no author on that because there is only name available. And that's for me the key as on developer experience and the key on choosing a communication layer like a framework like GraphQL over REST. Because with REST, I have to manually create my own types that are potentially outdated when the API changes. With GraphQL, I get this nice tooling out of the box that really provides me with the cool sense, okay, now there is no author available. I go here with name. And that's really everything. So it adjusts based on the thing you write and automatically generates those things. So how do I achieve that? I've shown you previously this magical command called codegen. And all what this is it's from a really awesome group called the Guild. They are doing tons of GraphQL tooling and stitching and everything in the ecosystem of GraphQL. And with that, you install some dev dependencies that are responsible for generating you those files based on the config. And if we take now a close look to this codegen YAML, which is like the single thing of configuration you need, you see that we specify, okay, we have here some local schemas. It could be a remote schema as well. So in my other example, I have a remote schema where we can take a look, for example, here with the Swappy. I have no API at all. It's like I only have the Swappy example. I point here to like the official Swappy GraphQL Netlify GraphQL server, and I say, okay, please generate all the types based on that. So if we take a look here, I hope it's large enough. You see, it will hard code here this endpoint for me inside this fetch function, say, okay, method post, there are potential query variables that can be sent. And I automatically generate you all those things as well. So when we take a look back, what does it do? First of all, I get types. I get types for every potential entity on that one. In the case of GraphQL, it's like, okay, I have a film node and tons of typing that is always up to date with your API. Therefore, it's always up to date with your code. And once we look a step further, we say, okay, all GraphQL files that are located under source, like all the documents here, we are going to generate next to the file a TypeScript file with the extension generated.ts. And because I really like React Query and what Tanner Lindsay is doing with that, because it provides you a convenience layer on top of like the React hooks for the fetch API, I say, I'm really convinced I don't need any big Apollo library, just using plain fetch with the React Query and just generate me and omit the type names. And the outcome is really that they have here a use query hook that has the all people query with the fetcher. That's the function we've seen previously that does exactly that for me. Heading back to the application, it's really easy because I get here like the data, in this case with the all people's query, because we switched to the Star Wars example, and I get even more. So I get like the error is loading, is fetching. So tons of state. And with that, I can really achieve best-in-class developer experience in comparison over a REST API. So when I go back now to an example with a REST API, so I have here a REST API example, and I take a look at what I get back here for the data. You can already imagine it, but it's any. And here, if the API would change or introduce a new field, I wouldn't know it. And if I have to write now a table where I say, okay, I want to display all the names, I really struggle by checking out, okay, what is really the structure of this object? Because is it results or is it result? I don't know. I have to query first the data and I fetch a lot of more. But GraphQL alone won't solve you the problem, because here I have the example of a plain GraphQL API, and that is done with a fetch call. You've seen it on the previous slide. Because you don't need tooling for GraphQL, but without the tooling, data is undefined or any, so you don't have the advantage as well. So in this case, I would rather stick with a REST API than using GraphQL. So in my opinion, the best potential, or why you should choose GraphQL, is probably based on its good type system. So if we go back to the slides, I hope you can see my slides. Can you see my slides?
Yeah. Yes, perfect.
Yeah, so skip that. We've seen that already. We are generating all these files. But when we recall what we now achieved, we achieved now best-in-class developer experience through a really cool tooling system. We achieved autocompletion with a live preview inside the browser. We achieved type data and a vast ecosystem. And I've showed you now an example with React Query, but there are tons of more plugins. So you can use it for Vue, you can use it for Angular, or even for plain JavaScript. So there is no limitation at all. And if you want to build your own plugin, there is even an extension for that you can build your own plugins on top of the whole tooling. And by the way, we fetched only what we needed. So in the end, I guess we did a great job on that one. So if you want to check it out, here are the links. Maybe we can send it in the chat as well. You can check it out on GitHub, and here is like the deployed version. You can just filter. So what has Asimov for books? iRobot. So heading back to the stream.
All right. Thank you for the demonstration, Lukas. I think it was really instructive, especially for people that don't know GraphQL so well yet. I hope we get some questions during the feed. We got the first one. So if starting from almost scratch, first REST and then GraphQL, or straight to GraphQL, what would you do? Would you write the REST API and then wrap it, or just write GraphQL out of the box?
To be honest, I would really start with GraphQL because, in my opinion, there is nothing that GraphQL cannot cover what REST can cover. So if you really want to do the journey on your own, you can do it, but you don't have to invent the wheel, in my opinion. So if you're interested, I guess it's even easier to start developing because you've seen there is so little tooling involved and it provides you so much feedback for writing a better code in the end. So I would advise to go with GraphQL because you cannot have the state where, okay, oh my gosh, I forgot what if this property doesn't exist on my result, and suddenly the whole app broke because you forgot the optional chaining and you accessed a property in an object. With GraphQL, it's fully type safe. And if you use TypeScript, I would say you are safe.
All right, next one. How do you make your API compatible with GraphQL? How do you specify the routes?
I built my API as targeting with GraphQL, and there is only one route, and this one route is called GraphQL. And on this one route, it's like the serverless handler. So with Netlify, you just export one handler, and this handler creates the GraphQL server. So I haven't used even the Apollo serverless or something like that. There are already libraries. You can check it out on GitHub. It's really minimal. So I tried to keep it as minimal as possible. Even with the UI build, there is no Webpack or big bloaty black box build involved. It's like a small bundler called ES-build, and Netlify does the rest for bundling the functions.
Yeah, so speaking of REST, there's another. Can you use GraphQL to talk to the database? How do you deal with database with GraphQL?
I would say you can do it with GraphQL. There are a tons of tools. So if you check out the tools from the guild, they already provide you a starting point. But on the other hand, see GraphQL as only like the broker of your data. It totally depends on your implementation where you want to gather the data. In my case, I just scraped it from a JSON, but what you put in your resolver, it's really up to you. There are already predefined sets where you have like direct data access, and there are like super starting libraries like Hasura, where you can go into GraphQL development. There are even content management systems like GraphCMS that already provide you like a super GraphQL API as first level thing. So maybe if you want to start with GraphQL, it would be a good starting point to rely on like a solution that already has like a database and provides you like an interface on top of it via GraphQL.
I think a lot of the power of GraphQL actually comes from the fact that you're able to construct this graph from all these different sources, right? And so, as you said, some of your resolvers might talk to the database, but some others might also talk to GraphCMS or any other CMS that you want, right? And you can sort of construct this hierarchical graph of your entire data, no matter where it's from, right? No matter which source it's from, you can just get it and expose it through this unified schema. That's super powerful. And what makes that even more powerful is the Polar Federation, which I'm super excited to hear about later from Jan, because that really sort of adds that extra set of like, oh, not only can you combine all of these different sources, but they can all specify their own schema and can also extend the schema of the others. And so it becomes a lot more powerful. But I'm sure Jan will talk a lot more about that later.
Yeah, that's cool. And how do we resolve queries if you have user-related data, like users have posts and users and posts are in two different tables? Do we always require GraphQL server, or can we consume direct REST API? Is this sort of related?
I guess Jan will target this as well.
Yeah. Okay. So we can leave this for later in the session. Yeah. I wanted to mention one thing about databases and GraphQL. So there is a solution called Post GraphQL. You sort of start from the database, and then it gives you the API on top of that. I will post it to YouTube as well and show it so people can check it out. But it's sort of there are a lot of solutions like this around GraphQL. So that just make it very, very easy to like prototypes and all that. So that it's really, really interesting world to explore.
the whole Prisma ecosystem as well. So this is like as well really good example of providing data via GraphQL.
Something I also really enjoy from Prisma specifically is Nexus, to create the GraphQL server in the first place, because it's based on TypeScript. And if you set everything up front to back with TypeScript, you actually get full type safety from the database level all the way to the client. And so if you remove a field in the database, your client TypeScript will suddenly tell you, hey, you're accessing a field that doesn't even exist anymore. Your server will tell you it doesn't exist anymore as you're exposing the API. And that just gives so much safety to your entire stack. I love working with Nexus. A huge fan of the Prisma folks.
So I don't know if you know this one, but I've used a solution called Type GraphQL for the React Finland API. It's really powerful because you write your this GraphQL declarations in TypeScript, and it just works. It gives you the types. It gives you a GraphQL API. So it's really nice for us. So there's a question as well. So your GitHub example is using pnpm. Can we install with Yarn, or do we need pnpm for your example?
Sorry, you need to install pnpm, but in my opinion, you should already have given pnpm a try, because it's so much faster and better than Yarn. And
All right, so it's
I added a link in the README with where you can install pnpm.
I think GraphQL isn't a controversial enough topic. We also need to get into npm devices, which was the best one, because otherwise, what would this meetup even be?
Yeah, of course. And I guess npm is the package manager which you use to install the package manager you want to use. So it's sort of, but yeah, that's another session. Maybe next year we don't touch package managers now. It's too controversial.
But you can delete the pnpm log file and just use Yarn.
Yeah, of course.
Dangerous.
That works. Yeah,
that's where the real danger lies.